everyone. It's so nice to see you here today. Thank you for joining us. And today we are diving into a really crucial topic, how to improve measurement strategies for success in this privacy-first era. Back then, you remember, everything was easier. The success was just numbers and data, which was available. And nowadays, with this privacy regulations and growing concerns on data protection, so we need to rethink our approach and we need to come up with more creative ways in order to make data more meaningful. So that's what we are going to discuss today. So I'm hoping that you will find some thought-provoking things and you will enjoy the session. I'm Cansu. I'm a mobile marketing professional. I've been with Adjust for 5 years. Adjust is a mobile measurement company, so we are helping marketers to grow their app. We specialize in campaign optimization, automation, app analytics, and incrementality. And I'm here with fantastic experts. And hello, welcome. And I'm really excited, looking forward to our innovative discussion. So it's really an honor having you here. So how about starting with a quick round of introduction? Maybe we can start with Vito.
Yep. Hey, everyone. I'm Vito. Great to be here, by the way. Thanks so much for making it. I am a growth marketer at Monzo. I've been at Monzo for about 4 years. Just before I go into detail, can I get a show of hands who knows about Monzo? Not bad. I know these guys know because they all work with me, which is great. I've been in the marketing industry in fintech for about 7-8 years now. I've worked in paid social and now cover or lead the whole performance marketing team for our retail side of the product. And I was a data analyst as well, which is, I guess, why I'm partly on this panel. And I'll hand it over to Javier.
Well, thanks, Vito. Pleasure to be here. Well, I am Javier, Javier Portillo. I work as a data scientist in Flix or FlixBus. I am sure that many of you know the company. And I've been working for the last 3 years. I specialize mainly in incrementality testing. We have a team specialized in measure things through incrementality testing. So yeah, happy to be here and to tell you a bit of our experience.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited. Then let's jump right in. My first question will be identifying the key challenges. What are the key challenges in app marketing right now you're facing to measure success in this privacy-first era? Do you want to start, Vito?
Yeah, I can start us off. So the challenges in terms of measurement are many. I think the first one is all around knowledge and knowledge about your customers. So really understanding who are your customers based on the fact that it's really difficult to track them at the moment. More importantly, how are they actually using your product? We know with all the app tracking changes that iOS and Apple have introduced, it's becoming increasingly difficult to really identify how users coming from different marketing sources and campaigns are using your product. And this has pretty specific implications on the value of your customers. So I'd say that's the first challenge. The second challenge is also from a creative perspective. Back in the days when, for example, Meta used to share things like order ID, you would be able to get really granular data, not only on your users, but also on your campaign and specifically your creatives. And you would be able to attribute, for example, users that perform certain activities to specific creatives. And now the difficulty is you can't do that anymore. You can get data as granular as campaign level maybe. And that means it's really difficult to identify the creative levers that you can kind of push on to drive growth from your campaigns.
Thanks, Vito. Well, on my side, for me, the biggest challenge is the adaptation that the whole company needs to do in this new era. From my side, as a data scientist, what I see is that, okay, the data changed, right? And the models adapted to this change. But with this change, the whole company needs to adapt because the models give us different results, different KPIs. So we need to adapt the way we understand these KPIs, the way we optimize these KPIs. So the changes needs to be on each level of the company, on the data science team, but also on the marketing manager, PPC manager, and in the end, the strategies need to change. And this is very challenging. To have a holistic view of all this problem is super difficult, on my opinion.
Thank you very much for helping us to identify the current challenges. We talked about like how difficult it is to identify that user, to keep track user activities, user engagements, or there is no granular data anymore. So when we think of that being said, what are some innovative approach or the strategies for measuring this user engagement or just to overcome these challenges?
So one of the things we started doing, I'll give a bit of context. As a company at the moment, Monzo's going through like hypergrowth. We're still growing. We've been around since 2015, and we're growing at extremely fast rates. And so from a KPI perspective, company-wide, we're really focused in on understanding, are we growing sustainably? And over the last few years, that's been our primary KPI, and we haven't necessarily like focused on revenue as much as pure volume growth. And one of the things we've started doing now is really leverage as much as we can first-party data and sharing them back with the platforms in ways that obviously are legal, and we have all the different kind of checks to make sure that we comply with privacy. And we are adopting two main approaches at the moment on two of our main platforms. So the first is Google. We're using value-based bidding. So what we're doing is we are modeling values for customers that obviously we have from a first-party data perspective, and we're passing them back to the platform. And what we're asking the platform to do is essentially to find the most valuable users that are likely to still perform the action that we are driving for, so getting a Monzo account, for example. So we're trying to really get or fulfill two things at the same time. One, growth, but also two, drive valuable growth. The second thing we're also doing with Meta, for example, is we are taking that approach and inputting values, like LTV models that we have internally back to the platform. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize that return on investment whilst maintaining growth volumes as well. So it's a really interesting balance that we're trying to find on both paid social and search platforms.
Cool, thanks, Vito. Very interesting. Well, actually, we have a very similar approach. We are also moving to the Google bidding strategy. And also, I agree that for me, it's very important that there's need to be an internal change in the sense that, okay, we don't have the same data as before. We need to adapt to this. Okay, which are the ways we have to understand better the customer? Which models can we apply internally? How can we get more data to understand better our customers? So how I see it is in two ways. Internally, we need to push for getting more data and getting the models to understand better the customer. And externally, the data providers are also adapting to this new era. So we need to take advantage of the new strategies that they have. But also, it's important to understand what is happening, how the model works. On my side, as a data scientist, this part is fundamental and also a big challenge. But yeah, I think that we have very interesting tools to do so.
So I know incrementality is becoming a hot topic, and you're also adapting that strategy. So how do you use these insights in order to allocate your budget or making more informed decisions? Or how often do you run this like incrementality testing? And we talked about like leveraging first-party data as much as possible. So maybe you can share a couple of examples with us so that it will inspire the audience today.
Do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. I work, I would say, 95% of my time with incrementality, so I could talk for hours. But basically, when we started like 3 years ago running incrementality testing, I think the first approach you can think of is like, okay, you run an incrementality test, so you know how the channel is performing, you take an action given that test. But actually, there are many challenges. It's not easy. Now, with this new framework of, for example, MMM models, actually, we know that the best way is to use an MMM model to calibrate to have an overall view and use incrementality testing as a supportive of this. But there are still many challenges. For example, how frequent you should test, how you manage this with the stakeholders that they want to be as performant as possible now, not in 6 months when the MMM model is in place. So there are many challenges. What do you think, Vito? You can complement me in this?
I can. So Monzo's in a very different stage, I'd say, from Flix. We're just starting on our MMM journey, I'd say. Up until recently, the way we've tried to validate whether the activity that we were running was actually efficient and actually driving incremental usage, let's say, was just through conversion lift studies. So incremental tests on specific platforms. Specific platforms have pretty much similar methodology, so it was very easy to kind of compare different channels because the models allowed you to do so. But it didn't really allow you to understand, one, how to allocate budget, and two, have that holistic picture of how your marketing activity was doing. Up until recently, we've only been doing conversion activity, so incrementality gives you a fairly good understanding from that conversion perspective. But as soon as you start layering over mid-funnel, top-of-funnel activity, you really want to understand whether the holistic allocation of your marketing budget is efficient or not, and driving, let's say, incremental growth versus your baseline. So it's that deviation from the baseline that you really want to try and identify. As Javier was saying, we now use incrementality as calibration factors for MMM model. And in terms of how frequently we would want to kind of run this, ideally it would be every single second. But that's expensive, it's not feasible. And one of the things we are consistently doing is trying to introduce new variants into the model so that we can really split out channel incrementality factors in our MMM. Like essentially, an MMM is a multivariate regression. What you want to do is you want to be able to say at any given time, we predict that Facebook, for example, is driving 2% of overall Monzo growth and Google is driving 4%. Those are really the main insights that an MMM will give you. And in terms of understanding how you allocate your budget off the back of that, I think it's a little bit nuanced. You have to kind of take into consideration best practices of how you run activity in your conversion channels as well. If any of us here are performance marketers, you'll know that any meaningful increase or deviation in your budgets will cause your campaigns to go back in learning phase. And that's probably something you don't want to be managing every single month. So there's different ways you can apply your budget allocation month on month when you look at your full funnel. And really the deviation, you could potentially start to think the way we are going to introduce that variation is through mid and funnel spending layered on top of a fairly consistent baseline for conversion. That was a bit of a long-winded answer.
Just a follow-up question here. Since you're leveraging this incrementality, probably you're not taking this attribution data account in order to evaluate what is the real value coming from the channels, right? You're doing this analysis and you're taking any actions accordingly. Because let's say in the short run, you're seeing that everything is performing really well, they're hitting your KPIs, but when you're looking into this MMM model, maybe you're seeing 60% of value, actually, that's the accurate value they are bringing. Is it something like that, or am I on the right path?
Yeah, you are. So MMM will definitely give you that insight, and we will make changes off the back of that. So for example, if an incrementality test on Meta is showing you that it's got more value, then Google will start slowly shifting that budget. What you probably don't want to do is continuously introduce massive variances across channels, because it's going to be very difficult for your MMM model to predict what the actual long-term value of that channel mix is.
And Javier, I also have a follow-up question, because at the first place you talked about we need to educate other stakeholders. So you're the one running this incrementality analysis. So how are you educating marketing team in order to take like the right actions, allocating budget, optimizing campaigns?
Well, it's a huge challenge, I would say. How we are doing it, I would say, is a joint work. We need to constantly work with them and make sure that they understand how the model works, at least on a superficial level, how to read the results and how to take actions. I think this is the most challenging part because it's not easy. My experience is, okay, I present a result and they want to go run and double the budget. No, wait. It doesn't work like that. You need to be careful, understand what is happening, understand which are the actions that should be taken to optimize the budget. So it's not an easy task, but as I mentioned before, we need to be very proactive in that, in making sure that everyone is in the same page and understand at least the basic concepts to optimize in the end the budget.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. I would like to talk about like the definition of success, since it's like also evolving. Like measurement is evolving, the definition of measurement is evolving, the definition of success, all the success metrics. So how has this definition evolved over time for you? So what are those success metrics you are looking into like on a regular basis?
So from our side, success is one, having visibility, a high-level visibility on, are you doing the right thing or not? Are you hitting your KPIs? So making sure you have all the right things set in place to actually be able to go to your senior stakeholders and say, the investments that we're making right now are yielding a positive result. And with the challenges that we've had in the industry in terms of, for example, Apple increasing their privacy thresholds and introducing scan, that's really challenging because now you're moving from a world where you had consistency across two different operating systems in terms of the high-level metrics you are able to attain and that level of granularity, to now two very opposite worlds. And one of the things that our data science team at Monzo has tried to do for us, and is the definition of success, is being able to paint a really clear narrative in terms of our goals. So, for example, one of the things that we've had to do, and we thought was the best decision to do, was combine the two KPI results from both Android and iOS together, so that we can very clearly go back to our senior stakeholders and say, our marketing activity drove X number of users, and on average, our gross customer acquisition cost is, I don't know, £10. Unrealistic, not real numbers, I wish. But that's like one of the main success criteria for us, is really that level of clarity. The second thing in terms of success is also having an infrastructure in your team that allows you to be very flexible and malleable with the ever-changing, let's say, landscape that we have in digital marketing. So, for example, one of the recent things we had to endure as a team was we were using Scan 3 on our iOS campaigns, and we had to very quickly migrate to the Scan 4 integration for specific channels. And we were only able to do that because we were set up in a way that allowed that one really easy communication across teams, and we all had the same goals. So making sure that different teams have the same goals that allow you to tackle unpredictable problems, for us, is a key measure of success.
And how is the definition of success is evolving for data science team?
It's a super difficult question. I think one of the challenges that...
Is there any tangible KPIs you're looking
Yes,
into?
I think that the KPIs on the model side, on the data science side...
model accuracy, for sure.
Yes, but one of the challenges of the MMM models is that it's super difficult to understand if the results are correct. And this is something that for me is, I would say, painful because the MMM model can tell you, I can predict for example, the revenue with this accuracy or MAPE, or I don't want to become too technical. But in the end, what it is doing is attributing values, right? So it's saying, okay, this channel is performing like this, and this channel is performing like this. But in the end, you don't know, or it's very difficult to know if that is correct. I mean, you can get a good prediction, but maybe the share, the attribution is not that good. And you need to lead with that. And you need to understand, okay, if this is not completely true, which would be the consequence? Which would be, how far would we be of the optimal point? This is the big challenge, and incrementality is one of the tools that we have to understand this. We can run an incrementality test in a channel that we say, okay, I don't trust in this result. Okay, let's run a test, let's prove it, and we trust more in incrementality testing. So yeah, but it's super challenging.
That was the $1 million question, right? Like every marketer's asking themselves, like, what would have happened if you weren't running that campaign? So you're trying to come up with an answer. That's not an easy task. That's for sure. Like everybody feels that struggle.
Can you imagine if you spend like £2 million because your model tells you to do so in Facebook, and then your growth just stops? That would not be a great.
Probably, yeah, that will be disappointing. But if you're running this incrementality test more often, when you start leveraging more data, at least you will be optimizing towards you can make data-driven decisions, right? Because otherwise you will be just spending blind. And as you mentioned, data is scattered around right now, and there is no consistency between two different operation systems. So we need to come up with different success metrics for iOS, right? One of them is consent rates. When we are increasing the consent rates, not only we can leverage this for retargeting purposes, but also if we are going to create predictive metrics, the metric will be more accurate. As much as data we are feeding in, and the more accurate the predictive metrics will get. So yeah, lots of success metrics, lots of challenges we are trying to overcome today. But as we are navigating between this balance, user privacy and also measurement accuracy, what are this creative approach do you think that, or methodologies do you envision emerging to address this challenging in app marketing, these challenges in app marketing?
So I'm going to answer this question not from a technical perspective, but actually from a creative perspective. So your actual creatives, the ads that you're showing. And one of the reasons, that's one of the ways that we've started to tackle these limitation or challenges that we have in the measurement industry, is kind of to follow the best practice that platforms are kind of advising for us. But as a banking product, actually, one of the things that we've realized is that creative needs to do a lot of the work. And although, it kind of ties to my first point, it's very hard to test from an attribution perspective what creative is actually driving the value. We can introduce an agile way of testing creative that allows you to understand incrementally, are the messages that you are going after the right ones and the ones that audiences are resonating with. If we take it back 6-7 years ago, the targeting capabilities that you had on platforms were super granular, and now that's kind of been taken away because of the privacy privacy threshold introductions. And so one of the approaches we're taking is making sure that we cover as many different avenues for different user personas through our creatives, and kind of go broad, and we're entrusting to some degree the algorithms of the platform to find the right users who would respond to specific creatives. So that's one way we're tackling it. We also have a triage, I'd say, of different data approaches that we use to actually tackle privacy thresholds. And I think we might touch on it later, but very quickly, it's a combination of attribution. We use last click, for example, incrementality testing, and the MMM models, MMM, which we've been talking about so far, and kind of understanding how you combine all three to make the best decisions.
Sorry, just one comment. I was thinking if anyone don't know what MMM is, I think it's worth looking for it, because it will be very relevant in the near future. Well, on my side, going to a comment I did before, I think that the changes need to happen on many levels, and part of the strategy is, I mean, the way we understand the customers changed completely. Before we could understand the customer in a way better way, and now we have a less concrete view of the customer. We understand the group of customers not as well as before, and we need to adapt to this. And the strategies, for example, the creative strategies need to adapt, need to change. The target, the audience we are targeting is different. So again, this needs to be on many levels, and on our side, on the data side, it's our responsibility to work with the creative team, for example, and make them know, okay, this is the view that we have of the customer. This is what we know. Which is the optimal strategy given this data. Again, we need to be very proactive on this work.
Thank you very much. And we are running out of time. We have just 3 minutes left, and we can maybe wrap it up with this final question. We talked about like these new technologies, new methodologies, and you mentioned that there is this like creative challenge to understand which one is performing better. Like we don't have this visibility, but at the same time, like in order to like generate the content, like there are some AI-based technologies. I don't know if it's there yet, like to make it more efficient, but I would like to hear from you actually. How do you see the future of this measurement evolving in this app marketing in light of this like machine learning and AI technologies?
It's a great question. I think the way we see this kind of environment evolving is very much starting to direct itself more towards MMM. So Javier, you mentioned a really important thing. How many of us actually knows what MMM is? Can I get raise of hands? Because I'm conscious that, okay, so maybe like 50%. So essentially, I'll explain it really quickly. What it is if you look at let's say you're interested in new user growth. Your new user growth goes like this over time. What your MMM tries to do is to say, okay, at any given point, 10% was driven by Google, 10% was driven by seasonality, 10% was driven by macroeconomic factors. So you're introducing not just marketing variables, but also external variables to try and paint a narrative for your overall growth strategy. And I think this is, with the increased privacy limitations that we have, this is going to start becoming one of the main ways that marketers are able to, one, get buy-in from senior stakeholders, and two, get more money. Because that's ultimately what marketers' value is to say, we believe we're making a change versus us not doing any marketing. And that is actually adding value to the growth trajectory of the company. So moving more towards that MMM model, I think is one of the main ways that we can tackle this. From an AI perspective, creatively, it's going to start becoming increasingly difficult to control, especially, for example, for us in the banking industry. I do see it playing an important role, but probably we're still a little bit far away from actually implementing it in our day-to-day.
Cool. Yeah, I completely agree again with the MMM, and also what you mentioned before, that we need a holistic view of the problem, and it's not only MMM. MMM alone cannot do all the work, so we need to have different models, kind of models. We need to have attribution also. We need to measure through incrementality testing, but I think that is not only in Monzo or in Flix, but is on a market level that this will be the future. These are the best tools we have, and they will become super important in the near future. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a huge change, and it needs to happen at many levels. So it's important to understand it and work to adapt well to this change.
We will slowly get there, I guess. Thank you very much. It was an honor having you here. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the session. So if you have any questions, you can just find us around. We will be here all day, so we will be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.